So, why are some nations rich while others are poor? Well, the short answer, according to our new Nobel Prize winners in economics, is malaria. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that is kind of what it comes down to. Let's delve into one of economics' most compelling theories about global inequality, developed by James Robinson, Simon Johnson, and Daron Acemoglu. The wealth gap between nations is really staggering, because today the richest 20% of countries are about 30 times wealthier than the poorest 20%. But here's what's really fascinating. Countries that currently are wealthy weren't always wealthy. In 1500, the Aztec and Inca empires were among the world's wealthiest societies. But fast forward for today and we see a complete reversal. Former colonial backwaters like North America have become global economic powerhouses, while once prosperous regions lag behind. This reversal of fortune demolishes simple explanations based purely on geography or culture in terms of why certain countries are wealthy or not. The key to understanding this transformation lies in what our Nobel Prize winners call institutional divergence. So during colonization, two distinct types of institutions emerge. First one is inclusive, and the second one is extractive. And these aren't just some academic labels, these are actually quite complex systems that can create very powerful feedback loops. Inclusive institutions rest on three pillars: secure private property rights, impartial legal systems, and genuine political participation. But their most important feature is something that economists call creative destruction. And this is the process where new innovations and businesses can freely replace outdated ones, even when this threatens the existing power structures that are in place. Extractive institutions, they're kind of the opposite of inclusive ones. So instead of political participation, they concentrate power and opportunity in the hands of the elites. And this persistence is rooted in something that economists call the commitment problem. So even though elites can promise things like reforms and wealth redistribution, but without real institutional change, these promises aren't credible. So the masses understand that without fundamental institutional reform, elites can simply reclaim any distributed assets in the future. So we now know that poorer countries tend to have extractive institutions. But what caused these institutions to emerge? Well, here our Nobel Prize winners did a very fascinating natural experiment in colonization patterns. In colonies with lower settler mortality rates, so fewer Europeans that died, these settlers were more likely to establish long-term communities. And this led to the formation of inclusive institutions, which promoted economic growth, property rights, and political stability. However, in regions with very high settler mortality rates, which can be caused by things like the disease environment, so if there was a lot of malaria, which resulted in many settlers dying, colonizers established only very minimal settlements. And this led to the creation of extractive institutions, which were really designed to funnel wealth back into the colonizing powers while exploiting the local population and resources. Another example of a predictor is the climate conditions. So tropical climates usually foster high disease burdens for settlers, which result in less settlers settling, and therefore more extractive institutions being set up in those climates. And here the idea of path dependence comes in. So once extractive institutions take root, they can create kind of these self-reinforcing cycles that resist any change. So elite interest really fundamentally often clash with broader interest of prosperity for bigger population groups, and without credible commitment mechanisms, these bad institutions will persist. So in some way, it was exactly this disease environment and the malaria that caused settlers to set up certain institutions that then managed to persist across time because of these feedback loops that we have. And this may explain why certain development efforts sometimes fail, because the path to a wealthy country seems to require more than just economic reform. It seems to demand quite fundamental institutional transformation.